I've lost interest in a lot of stuff, which I find a bit concerning.
Well, you're going through nihilism. I find whenever I'm sick, I enter into a nihilistic attitude.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. But this is even before I got sick. I was, just just this idea of like always having to have the right opinion and always discovering new opinions and just living in this world of opinions got to be there seemed to be no point to it in the end because having the correct opinion really didn't matter. There was no like real world consequence. Like you could believe that the world is flat, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could be totally convinced of it, which is a stupid opinion, but you could nevertheless leave a very successful, fulfilling life. The
Yeah.
two are non-overlapping magisteria. So,
Yes. Yeah,
and
that's profound. And discourse surfing just gets tiring when people are just making like instantaneous opinions for clicks, which
yeah,
is sort of Destiny's modus vivendi, as opposed to something that's more considered and even though it's less dramatic, it's more possibly valuable,
yeah.
such as this show.
Well, I think good debate should be about. Well, here's the thing. It's only worth thinking about things that have a practical application. If there's no practical application to what you're thinking about, you're wasting your time. It's not a good use of time. You know, you need to enhance your health. You need to enhance your emotional well-being or your financial well-being. These are things worth thinking about. Thinking about is John Mearsheimer right about this and wrong about that doesn't have any consequence. You know,
Yeah.
like is Russia and Ukraine, is Russia right? Is Ukraine right? There's no practical expression of that, of having that right opinion.
Yeah. What do you think about the idea that we tend to see the world as we are rather than as it is? So I remember, for example, with Dennis Dale, like any news story, it would just be a reason for him to become even more depressed about the trajectory of the United States.
No, he started Black Build and he ended Black Build.
And every major news story was just a further reason for him to get black pilled. And I noticed this with a lot of friends, like particularly dissident friends. Every major news development is just an excuse to become more black pilled.
Yes.
And that's tiring and it's depressing and it's not intellectually impressive.
Yeah, and like we have a mutual acquaintance, and I still run into him once in a while, and he's still he's really into this sort of dissident ideology, and all of his talking points sort of revolve around it, and it's just so tiring and exhausting to be around that I can't wait to sort of separate myself from the conversation, and then I feel like you know I feel relieved when I'm just not having to participate in it,
Yeah.
um and it's sort of like it's a mask. I've come to see it as sort of this obsession is just a, a mask for some shortcomings in his own life,
Yeah.
and um
Yeah. It wears on one. I mean, I've got like in Orthodox Judaism, almost all my friends are right wing, but I've got one thoughtful right wing friend who's just tired of going to Shabbat meals to hear these low IQ critiques of the Biden administration. Like when you hear these tropes over and over again, it's just where.
yeah, yeah, like and like like Sticks Hexenhammer, like I'm not
Right.
subscribed to him, but he still appears on my feed, and it just seems like he's he rose to fame with his sort of um
Alt-right
yeah,
adjacent.
yeah, well his big, I think he rose to fame because he made this prescient prediction that Trump would win the 2016 election, and
Hmm.
this bought him a tremendous amount of credibility and audience. And that's all he ever talks about is Trump, Trump this, Trump that, Trump this, Trump that. Here's my analysis of Trump, and it's always his conclusions are always pro-Trump. And it's just a
Yeah.
fait accompli. And this type of discussion is just tedious. Um, so,
What about Civil War videos? Why the United States is heading for a civil war? Do you find that tedious?
I don't believe it's true. Yes, I find it tedious. I think, yeah, I don't really have any predictions about what's going to happen, but things are just kind of going to grind along, and sometimes they're going to get messy and weird, and then something new happens, and then you just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I remember so many examples from my own life when I was absolutely convinced that these cataclysmic developments were heading our way, and or I just had some hyperbolic reaction to life that, upon reflection, just seems so silly.
Yes, yes, and I think back when I was really young and all the strange political crap I believed in then. It's like it's so embarrassing. I'm so glad the internet wasn't around when I was young, because I would have consigned myself to irrelevance.
So
I would have
Bell's,
been unemployable.
Bell's saying, Luke used to monitor people like Richard Spencer and Nick Fuentes, and my reaction is these guys are meretricious, right? They say things that are exciting often, but it's such a transparent ploy for attention. The shifting, particularly of Richard Spencer, the constant dramatic shifts. It's such a meretricious appeal. Meretricious means showy, but lacking in substance. It's such a showy appeal for our attention that I just got tired of it.
Yeah, I've Elon's leader. He's
Yeah.
capable of starting things, but he can't see things to the end. And I think this is true of a lot of people with trust funds or with wealth, independent wealth that's from work. They can't buckle down and get through the difficult parts. They'd rather sort of get something started, get the exciting part out of the way, and then there's always something more tantalizing that you could jump to and just go to the next dopamine hit rather than sort of grind through the nasty bits to get something in. So and so he has this sort of he just has this disparaging attitude towards sort of basic block and tackling of politics, right? He does, things like crime and gas prices, and these sort of bread and butter, boring issues. He has no stomach for it because he wants to talk about these big, mythological themes and literary motifs that go on between this community and that community, on and on and on. But just he's just afraid of grit. Some people he has no grit. And
I
so,
remember about 3 years ago, someone associated with the Southern Poverty Law Center, someone like Jared Holt, who's like anti-right wing researcher with basic Marxist view of the world. He condemned people who attacked Richard Spencer, and essentially he said, Richard Spencer is on our side now. People should stop giving him a hard time. And so that made me think, because Colin Liddell just posted, Richard Spencer didn't change his views. The feds just got to him, and maybe there's something to that.
I don't know. I don't know who's a Fed and who's not a Fed. I don't know how to process those.
I let that run on for a bit longer than I planned to, but I was thinking that here is there were belief after belief after belief being stated by both Luke and Elliott, and what was interesting about it is that, well, I had something to say about their beliefs because I had different beliefs. And basically, they were saying that there was no point having beliefs because everybody had them and everybody at some stage is proven wrong. And that there were people who had weird opinions just to be different. And Luke described them as meretricious for clickbait purposes. But I think opinions are necessary because often we are asked our opinions about things, either for good reasons or not so good reasons. Sometimes when we are asked our opinion, it might not be a good idea to actually give our real opinion in case we got into trouble. If it's between, say, two friends who were quarrelling and we were asked our opinion about their dispute, it might not be a good idea to give our true opinion in case one of them got upset with us. And you would lose a friend. Or you end up having both of them upset with you and losing both friends. So on the one hand, Elliott was saying opinions are not important because there are people who had very stupid ones and seem to do quite well out of being internet personalities. And then he said that he had opinions that he realized were wrong and thought were stupid when he was younger. But I would have thought that if you get things wrong, you will try not to repeat the same error. So Yuval Harari has written a book saying something that I can't decide whether it is or isn't obvious. But basically, he was saying that humans have the power of imagination, and we make up stories about stuff, and we are capable of abstract thinking, thinking about ideas such as justice and competence and banking systems and that sort of thing that require trust. And all these big words are abstract ideas that we cannot hold in our hand. But they are nevertheless very important in making us behave in certain ways. So if we lost trust in our banking system, we would all withdraw our funds, and then there would be a run on the banks, and then the whole financial system would collapse. So we veer between wanting to keep our money in our mattress and keeping it in the bank, because we would feel very silly if there was a run on the bank and our banks collapsed and we had no money. But then we would also feel silly if someone burgled us and took all the money we put under the mattress. Well, that was the old way of doing things. Now, keeping large amounts of cash is forbidden. The banks make it very hard for us to withdraw large amounts of cash without asking awkward questions. And I think even thieves prefer to steal people's credit cards. But the idea is that we would behave very differently if we did have trust in our banking system than if we didn't. And also whether we believe in a court and legal system and trusted or ruling classes. So beliefs are important in that someone in the world is trying to change the beliefs of other people. So parents, it has been argued, would be indoctrinating their children with their beliefs, and children might be trying to persuade their parents to do something by hoping to make them believe that certain things should be bought for them because I don't know. You would be a good parent if you bought me, those shoes, or allowed me to go to that school, and that sort of thing. So these actions are based on our beliefs, and even if we say that many of our beliefs have been wrong, and even the people who make a living out of expressing their beliefs and opinions are wrong, at some level we do need to have a good think about what we believe and why. And one of the things that struck me as particularly annoying was Elliott saying, nobody cares what John Mearsheimer says about some aspect of US foreign policy. And I thought that as an American, he ought to care, because if there is a third world war, it would affect Americans too. And this made me think a little bit further about the unsustainability, basically, of representative democracy. So even out of rejecting Elliott's beliefs and opinions, I find myself coming to an ever firmer conclusion that representative democracy should be abolished forthwith. So if Elliott, who thinks of himself as an intelligent person, can't see the point of taking an interest in foreign policy, probably because no one he speaks to cares about foreign policy. So even if he did know about foreign policy, people just wouldn't care. Or I suppose he could think, well, so he knows about foreign policy, and he meets somebody else who knows about foreign policy, and then they have an argument. And I suppose he does have a point in saying, and none of us would be any the wiser, because he would. Somebody might think it's a good idea to provoke a war with China, and the other person wouldn't. So what is the point? I actually have friends like that saying, what is the point of having a political opinion? Because all we can do is argue about it, and we don't really know who's actually won. But actually, you can tell. Well, I suppose if you live to tell the tale. So if World War III breaks out, and you don't want it to break out, then you might think, I should have done a few more things to prevent the outbreak of World War III. But I think it's difficult for Americans, because we don't know if Trump is just going to have the same old foreign policy as Biden. We really don't know, because Trump has said things such as him being better at foreign policy and not threatening to bomb everyone, but then he has also threatened to bomb everyone, and then shook hands with them. So we don't really know. But what are we to conclude about American presidents saying crazy things about foreign policy and saying things that might even cause the outbreak of the Third World War? This is something obviously Americans should think about very carefully, because it is their country after all. But so should the rest of us. So this friend of mine who said, it doesn't matter what we think about any political subject, We can argue about it and get ourselves upset about it, but in the end, it doesn't change anything. But surely, if we change our opinions for a more correct one, we are in some way improving our ability to perceive, to tell the difference between truth and falsehood, and in some way being able to make the correct decision about whether to obey the law or not, or a certain rule, or God's laws, or and speaking of which, I suppose the most important thing, most important question is whether God exists and whether we should obey him, because if we got that bit right, then everything will be less painfully confusing. So I know that Luke and Elliott do not believe in God, and that is why they keep vacillating from saying they're going to do things this way and then saying they'll do things in a different way the next time you hear them speak. And this is something I find particularly infuriating. Why can't they just stick to their guns? And it's annoying having to listen to people who don't know their own minds, and they don't even have the woman's prerogative to change her mind, being male. So and then this obviously goes on to the question of how should men and women behave, and how should they be allowed to behave, and but then it becomes also a political question of is gender a social construct, and if so, why don't we just let men and women behave however they like, and instead of squishing them into the gender roles that they're no longer able or willing to perform. I did have it out with Elliott through an exchange of messages, but I don't think he takes these things seriously. So on the one hand, he calls himself, a Buddhist. So I asked, well, do you believe in reincarnation? And I know the answer is no, or not really, or maybe. And but the thing is, as a Buddhist, he is obliged to believe in reincarnation. And then we go back to his belief that beliefs are pointless. So I think he is particularly confused, and we can tell from the exchange that not having firm beliefs causes confusion and doubt. But then Elliott also thinks it's stupid to have beliefs or to set too much store by them. And of course, there are two schools of thought. So, obviously, if you have the right opinion, you should stick by them. But if you don't, then you should let it go. But how do we know if we have the right opinion or not? Is it that hard to work out how is it that hard to work out whether God exists or not? Yes and no. I think I have figured out a system, and whether we should obey his laws, that is obvious. We have to obey laws, whether we believe in God or not, and obviously our government makes laws for us, and we have no choice but to follow them if we don't want to be punished. So all these complaints by men who feel despair and rage and fear at the corruption and incompetence of their government is Well, it's based on their belief that their governments are lying to them. But why is government so corrupt? And you see, we're always going back to the question of religion and God and what kind of beliefs we ought to have. And so the Abrahamic God requires us to believe in him and to believe in the afterlife. Both are necessary because it is only belief in the afterlife that we will more conscientiously and more willingly obey his laws from generation to generation. And this obviously has a knock-on effect on our civilization. Since Western civilization is the most powerful one at the moment, we should ask ourselves what beliefs Westerners have. And of course, the answer is that they don't have any beliefs. They are in a state of perpetual uncertainty and confusion and anger and fear and hatred because they don't know what the hell is going on. And they want to blame people, usually Jews, foreigners, and Muslims. So the interesting thing is that, we can only go back, rely on the history, on history to tell us what Westerners are supposed to believe in that they no longer believe in. So, since the order is liberal, we have to at least acknowledge superficially that superficially they are supposed to be liberals, that the political orthodoxy is liberalism. And we also know that Trump and his supporters are not liberals, since they are dissidents and they dissent from the liberal order and reject neoconservatism, which is a euphemism for American imperialism, and neoliberalism, which is the trading policy of the American empire, which is basically to treat the whole world as an economic, as a collection of economic zones, which even Americans object to, because it obviously means that their country isn't their own country now, because people from all over the world can just come and replace Americans. And obviously, beliefs are important if you're going to go to war over somebody else with different beliefs, or you're going to fight someone for having different beliefs. And as we know, this happens quite a lot in Western democracies because people don't agree. And the whole point of having a religion is really to minimize. I'm not saying it will completely end people not seeing things eye to eye. But if we narrow it down to having an official moral system, then people will at least know what the official rules are, and then while they might resent them or dissent from them or have different interpretations of the same rules, the potential for conflict and disagreement is significantly decreased. And that is why it is important to have an official moral system. And it is undisputed, it is indisputable that America does not have an official moral system, and this is the source of its troubles. So no American is going to come and tell me that actually I'm wrong and the religion of America is, whatever he's going to say it is, or or the political system is, well, okay, they're going to say liberal democracy, but liberal democracy just means representative democracy, which means general elections and political parties. And what is liberalism? I already know that even the most senior political the most senior professor in political science won't be able to tell me what the principles of liberalism are, because they have changed over the centuries. So I know that in Britain there's something called Manchester liberalism or classical liberalism, which is really conservatism, and in Australia they have the Liberal and Labour Party, and Liberal down under means conservative. So it's very confused and incoherent, and nobody cares anymore, because they know it's all the government making up the rules as it goes along. So it's very obvious that something needs to be done to give these Americans who are sadly, badly in need of an official moral system, and an official moral system, and I'm saying it's secular Quranism, and nobody can think of a better gift to the Americans than secular Quranism. The only thing that stops this from happening is the Islamophobia of everybody else. So it is their inability to appreciate my genius and my logic and the indisputable nature of my conclusions that prevents them from just being sensible for a change. So we know Americans are supposed to believe in God because on their dollar bill it says, "In God we trust." And obviously the American economy relies on trust in the way their financial institutions are being run. So all these, what I'm talking about is beliefs, the beliefs of people, the beliefs of American citizens about whether the election was stolen, whether that Trump will win. They don't know, because the future is uncertain, and they know that what they want is a stable economy, a stable society, a stable political system, and a ruling class they can trust. It's very simple, really. So they would want a meritocracy, but it isn't a meritocracy, it is a degenerate matriarchy. So why won't these American men actually say something or do something? It is because they believe that they'll get cancelled if they complain. But then they also want to think of themselves as not cowards and not stupid and not effeminate. And so they somehow try to juggle these different conflicting beliefs through words and conversations with each other that in a way reveal their confusion. So, I mean, I've told them that really it would just feel better if you just said what you believe to be the truth, because it gets it out of your system. And actually, a lot of people do that. I remember years ago, in my many Twitter accounts, there was this woman who would tweet away, and then I know you're thinking, I'm thinking of Carol, but it's not, it's somebody else. So she would do that, and then the next day she'd delete all her tweets. which I thought was a terrible thing, because you're kind of undoing your work. It's like, knitting or something, and then just unpicking or everything. But if you feel compelled to knit, then I suppose it doesn't really matter, because if the object of the exercise is to knit, then and not to get the jumper or the scarf or whatever, then I guess it fulfills its purpose. But there's obviously some kind of neurosis going on. So back to the point of beliefs. It's important to have beliefs, and obviously to take your own beliefs seriously, seriously enough to argue about them and defend them. And I'm not discouraging people from doing that at all. I'm saying, yes, take your beliefs seriously, and base your beliefs on truth and logic, and your opinions on morality. And now we come to the difficult bit of arguing over what morality is. But I think these conversations need to take place for people to be clearer in their minds about what they ought to believe, what they ought to say, and how they ought to act, because it will make them ultimately happier. So in the conversation with Luke, you can hear, well, it from beginning to end, on Luke's stream, that there were intimations of mortality, because Elliott is feeling unwell, and I guess if you feel unwell for a while, you probably think, oh, will I ever get better, or is this it, and isn't the world ending anyway, who cares, and those kinds of doomy, gloomy thoughts. So back to Elliott's beliefs. Does he believe in reincarnation? Because if he does believe in reincarnation, he obviously wants to, be reincarnated into a better life rather than a worse life. And one thing Buddhists don't seem to care about is who runs the system of reincarnation. They just assume it naturally happens, and without some directing intelligence. I thought it was a bit weird until I realised that ultra-Orthodox Jews also believed in reincarnation, because it is a form of afterlife, and they are required to believe in an afterlife, because centuries, millennia ago, some Jewish sage worked out that if you don't really believe in God or in afterlife, then you would think in the short term meaning your life, the length and extent of your life, and then you won't care about posterity. And this will cause you to behave in a nihilistic and narcissistic way. Good. So Elliott, you do believe in reincarnation. So it means that you have to somehow adjust your behavior so you don't end up, being reincarnated as a cockroach or something. You want to be, Elliott the Great, or some, better version of yourself in your next life. So the logic of that, of believing that doing the right thing in this life will get you a better afterlife, is crucial to making us act in a moral and principled way. Otherwise, you'll just be vacillating between, should I do this, should I say this or not? And for atheists, they only work on what they think are certainties. So it would be, if I accept the bribe, will I be paid? If I defy this person threatening me, will they carry out this threat? well, if they were principled people, they would either defy the person threatening them or reject the bribe if because they would know it's the wrong thing to do. It is just as wrong to accept bribes as it is to submit to threats from evil people. But then Elliott has been saying that he thinks that the purpose of life is to look after number one, and so he is apparently advocating behaving in the way that the people he is complaining about are behaving, like winner takes all. The strong do as they will, the weak suffer as they must. And obviously that is contradictory. So I see that he is agreeing with me. So he believes in reincarnation, and it's a property of the consciousness. I'm not sure what that means. Good deeds are rewarded, bad deeds are punished. Whether I believe this or not is irrelevant. Okay, well, I take your point that something is either true or not true, and our beliefs are irrelevant to the extent that believing and not believing in a certain state of affairs is not going to change it. But on the question of our own well-being, if we believe that it's going to rain, then in order to avoid getting wet, we should carry an umbrella. It's that sort of thing. So it would help if our beliefs are correct and that we carry an umbrella if we think it's going to rain, and hopefully it does rain, so we feel vindicated in our in taking the trouble to carry an umbrella. So I don't understand why he keeps saying it's irrelevant. It's relevant to you what you ought to do, even if it is irrelevant to the world at large. So I think a lot of the neurosis that I see around me is because people don't know what to believe. So on a good day, they might believe good things will come. On a bad day, they think the world will end. And it's just like that for them every day. And yes, I can see that it would drive them mad. Yes, right views are part of Buddhism. Right views mean seeing things correctly. So how are we to know if things are being seen correctly? I base my claims on undisputed facts because, well, why else would I, make some claim that cannot be proven? So I would say things like the Iranians got their country back with Islam, and somebody tried to argue with me about it, but I don't think he succeeded in undermining my claim. I mean, the best he could come up with was to say the Islamic Revolution wasn't particularly Islamic, or the Ayatollah Khomeini didn't keep his promises. But so what? Iran is now the world's most powerful theocracy, so, and should be called the Caliphate. And Muslims should rally around Iran and support support it instead of trying to undermine it. And I'm saying also that the Sunnis are finding it very difficult to do this because, they Iran is Shiite, and they don't want the other lot getting all the glory, and they don't want to be submitting to the other lot. So I'm full of, all these bright ideas, really, but I don't think my ideas are can be undermined. I know people hate them, but that's a different thing to be, to saying that I'm wrong or have based my opinions on facts that can't be proven. But then my problem is that I live in a post-truth society where people don't really care. They don't care if you've won the argument. They'll just be saying, "What's in it for me?" I'm not going to be doing this thing, even though it is the right thing to do, because I see no prospect of an immediate reward, and I'm only here for the reward and not the risk. And this applies to speech, to opinions. So my view is that the culture war can easily be won if everybody just said what they believed. And even if they're wrong, it would still be a worthwhile exercise proving them wrong. So one of the things that Luke was complaining about, yes, and also Elliott was saying, all these stupid people with their political views are so boring. And it's only boring if you've heard it all before and you don't think anything further needs to be done. You think that these bores should be doing something for you, or in some way making things happen. But if they're so low IQ and stupid, then why would you expect them to change anything? Since you're obviously higher IQ and far more interesting than those dullards who bore you. So my belief is that if everyone argued their point, then the people holding the correct views would win. But as it is, since atheists are cowards, and cowards will not be saying anything or doing anything interesting, they have, in a way, surrendered their country to the evil neocons who are going to start a third world war, and after that, the reputations of Americans and white people will be mud, and well, then it won't be very nice for them. Right views, Elliott, are obviously, factually correct. Or I would say the truth is what is not disputed. That is the most practical way of defining it. So, in a time when people believed the Earth to be flat, it didn't matter. It didn't matter because nobody was going to make a thing about it until was it Christopher Columbus decided to sail around the Earth, because he decided to prove the consensus wrong. So Elliott makes a prediction saying that I would still be unsatisfied. No, I'm very easily pleased. I have so many ideas of how to improve and make it fun for everyone. All these cultural ideas, game show ideas, quiz, examinations and Quranic knowledge, competitions, so many things that I think you should support me just because it's going to be so much fun. So I think I have made my point to Elliott about the importance of his opinions, even though they're wrong, because he cared to express them, and I heard them, and I disputed them, and I think I refuted them. I refuted his incorrect beliefs, and so he's got to rethink his opinions, his false opinions, and come to a more correct understanding and a more correct behavior for a principled, decent, honest American. Thank you all for listening.